My name's Ottoline Liza and I am the director of the Sainsbury Laboratory at the University of Cambridge. And I am interested in how plants make the decisions that allow them to adapt their form to suit the environment in which they're growing. I think one of the things I find interesting is the way people are so influenced by movement. It draws us in and you're immediately attracted to something that's moving, and if it's an animal you're looking at what it's doing, you're trying to think about how that relates to you and the kinds of things that you would be doing, and when you try and think about plants in that context it doesn't make sense. They're not moving, you're not really looking at them, they're kind of part of the scenery. The things that they are doing are not things that we recognise, they're not things that people do, so we tend to have a kind of assumption that they're not really doing anything. They just respond, they don't actively engage in their environment and make decisions about their lives, and of course that's not even slightly true. It's just that the decisions they're making are very different because of their very different lifestyles, because of the different drivers that keep them alive. So for animals, the thing that keeps you alive is finding food. You have to go and find it, and that's what the movement's about. Plants, their food comes from nothing almost, what we would think of as nothing. They're building themselves out of thin air, a bit of water from the ground, a few mineral nutrients, and that's powered by sunlight, by light energy. It's amazing to think about how an organism can do that. And so because of these very different drivers that are influencing the way plants and animals work, of course the way that plants and animals make decisions and the outcomes of those decisions are very, very different. But to me that's what makes plants so exciting and interesting, precisely because they're living to such a different set of rules with such a different set of priorities. So maybe a good example would be that as I described, there's shoots for collecting up carbon dioxide and light, and there's roots for collecting up water and nutrients. And at any one time, a plant you can think of as having a kind of budget, a resource budget. It's got a certain amount of carbon, a certain amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that it's collecting, and it has to decide where to put that. Should it invest that in more shoots, or should it invest it in more roots? If it's deciding to invest that in the shoots, should that be one really tall shoot, many really short shoots? There's lots of decisions like that plants are making all the time. The decisions have got to be the decisions that result in the plant doing the best it can, and that means making as many seeds as it possibly can. Basically that's the kind of thing that natural selection chooses. Success is defined as how many grandchildren you have. So if you go back to this idea of, for example, of limited mineral nutrients, if you see a plant growing in an environment with very few minerals, very few nutrients in the soil, it looks pretty wimpy, and typically people would think, oh, that's a pretty pathetic plant, it hasn't got many nutrients, it can't grow, that's not very interesting. But actually what's happening is the part you can see is pretty wimpy, but the part under the ground is likely to be much happier than the part above ground. Happier isn't really the right word, but anyway, the resource that the plant has available is investing in the root, not in the shoot. And that makes sense, because if you're limited by nutrients, you want to put the resource that you have got into the part of the plant that has the most probability of helping you to gather extra resources. So that root-shoot balance is very important, and a lot of that is also influencing how many branches the shoot makes. So a lot of my research is about how plants manage to balance the growth that they have across the shoot system, and also between the shoot system and the root system. And the core to all those kinds of decisions is based on a little innocent looking molecule called auxin, which is a very simple chemical that's a hormone that's made by every single one of the growing shoot tips of a plant. It's exported into the main shoot and transported right down to the root, and it promotes growth in the root. So the more shoots you have, the more roots you might have, so that gives you an overall balance. But at the same time, the amount of auxin produced by each shoot tip, for example, that can be varied. The properties of the transport system that move it around the plant, that can be varied. Those things can all be varied depending on the environment. So the plant will sense the environment, change those things, and that will allow it to change its growth depending on the environment it's growing in. So an important element of that decision-making system is that it is distributed across the whole plant. It's about every shoot tip contributing information, and that competition and processing and reinforcement, and that way no plant parts are unique. Every part is expendable. So again, if you go back to your animal comparison, most of those decisions are being made in your brain, and that's central. All the information comes in, centrally processed, all it comes back out again. But that means if your brain is damaged, you're in big trouble. And a plant can't really afford to have so much invested in one part, because it can't run away from predators, so no part can be that important. So instead, it's evolved this very beautiful distributed decision-making process to allow it to make the same kinds of decisions, but without a central system. But it's distributed across the whole shoot.